The three biggest mistakes that you should avoid with your puppy retriever training. Welcome to Cornerstone Gundog Academy, where you can learn to train your retriever with our online videos. So there's three major mistakes that are easily made in retriever puppy training. And honestly, the reason they're easily made is because it just feels like you should do them. It just feels natural. And that's mainly because you've got this puppy, you're ready to start the training, you're so excited to get out. And honestly, if you're like me and you've been researching it forever, and especially if you've been on a waiting list for a couple of years, you can probably hardly wait to actually get to doing the training, which is why you got your hunting dog to begin with. And as this little puppy, there's a few things that you really shouldn't do that could actually hinder your progress forward. And let's actually talk about those three things. And the first mistake that can be made is just too much too soon. And this really is going to come down to retrieving, but really any training for that matter. Because if you've got a young puppy, their attention span, number one, isn't going to last that long. We're only talking 5-10 minutes tops, and really you're not getting the maximum amount of time if you're going on to the 10 minutes. So 5 minutes is a good training session timeline. But let's relate it to retrieving, because if you're getting a hunting dog, most likely you're thinking about retrieving, and that's what you want to do a lot of. And the big mistake is just to start piling in the retrieves, doing as many as you can. And really, that is not what you want to do, because it doesn't really ultimately benefit your dog. The key is, instead of doing too much too soon when it comes to retrieving, you want to do just the right amount. And we're not talking about a lot of retrieves. You don't have to do a lot. We're probably talking 2 to 3, maybe 4 retrieves tops. And you could do that every day, but really it's probably better on an every other day or every few days type schedule. And the reason that is, you always want to leave your dog hungry for more, because if you're out there doing 10, 15 retrieves and you're retrieving until your dog gets tired and it stops, then what you're doing is you're teaching your dog that it can stop whenever it's tired, whenever it wants to. And as you and I both knew, if you're out there hunting, sometimes the hunting is going to get a little tough. It's going to be harsh conditions. It's going to be cold. And there's going to be some times where there's tons of birds coming in, and you don't want to have your dog quitting on you in those situations. It needs to learn that it needs to go until you tell it to stop. And then also limiting the retrieves and not doing too much actually builds that desire, because if you imagine the dog is getting a few retrieves, then you stop and it's thinking, well, I want to keep going. And what that does is it just puts that burning desire. It's basically like fanning the flame to where it encourages it to want to retrieve even more. So the big key here is don't do too much too soon. The next thing is long distance isn't always best. And there's a few reasons for that. The other temptation is, other than doing too many retrieves, is let's see how far we can get our little puppy to retrieve. And honestly, you could probably get a young puppy to retrieve a long way, maybe even 100 yards if you wanted to. But that's not necessarily the most beneficial thing. And there, again, the reasons are, number one, if you're working on those retrieves, the longer the distance is, there's a greater chance for the fundamentals to be lost. And it's important to practice fundamentals. If you remember, a common theme that we talk about a lot is the habits that are created now are the behaviors that are going to be exhibited later. So whatever you practice now is what your dog will do later. And honestly, you might not think about it, because your dog might be out there, you might throw a bumper, or you might do a long retrieve 50 yards out there. The pup might grab the bumper by the tassel and bring it back. And you might think that is fantastic, but that's actually not very good, because if you think about it, the dog is practicing grabbing the bumper in the wrong spot. Or maybe even grabbing it on the end. And that's poor fundamentals. You want to practice solid fundamentals, and that's why you don't want to do too long of retrieves. It's better to do less retrieves and shorter retrieves, but make sure that the retrieves that you're doing are exactly like they need to be done. That's basically like surgical precision. You're doing it exactly right, and you're practicing the right fundamentals. Because if you think about it, the same is true when the habits that are created now or the behaviors that will be exhibited later. The same is true if you do it the right way. If you create good habits now, you're going to have great behaviors later, exactly what you're looking for. And you could fix it on down the road, but that's going to take away time from the things that you should be doing down the road if you're doing the training right. So try to avoid too long distance retrieves. I would say keep it short. We're not talking far. We're only talking just hand thrown distance, and really not really chunking at distance. We're talking short distance. Keep it short. Make sure the dog is doing the right retrieves, and making sure that you're practicing solid fundamentals. So we talked a little bit about where the dog grabs onto the bumper, and really what I want you to avoid, the next major mistake, is missing the small details. And that's something that, again, is easy to miss. You might see your pup go out there, they might grab onto the side of the bumper, and then, you might think that's great, but that's a small detail that you want to avoid. Now, if your pup grabs the bumper, you still want to praise the dog for bringing it back, but you still want to help start positioning your dog in a situation where it can win. You can cut the tassels off of your bumper, or you can retrieve with something else, maybe a small tennis ball, or you can retrieve even with a pair of socks. You need to make sure that you set your dog up for success and think about all the little details that go into this, because that's going to help set you up for success. If you avoid these three major issues, then you're going to be well on your way to creating great habits, which is going to set your dog up for success as you advance it in the training.